Mom, if you don't wire the money tonight, the bank will take everything by morning. My son Ryan said those words at 11:40 on a rainy Thursday night, and I believed every single one of them. I was sitting alone in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, wearing my old blue robe with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. The digital clock above the stove blinked softly, while Ryan's voice cracked through my phone like he was holding himself together by a thread. He told me the business was collapsing. Payroll checks were bouncing. Investors were threatening lawsuits. I could hear breathing in the background, and for a moment I thought Vanessa was crying beside him. "I hate asking you this, Mom," he whispered, "but you're the only person who can save us." I closed my eyes and stared at the framed photo of Ryan at age 12 holding the first trout he ever caught with his father. My boy had always hated asking for help. That was how I knew this had to be serious. The next morning I woke before sunrise with a strange heaviness sitting in my chest. Not panic anymore. Panic is loud. This felt quieter than that. Colder. I made oatmeal and coffee without tasting either one and sat at the kitchen table staring at the snowfall outside my window. Every few minutes my eyes drifted toward the transfer receipt still folded beside my purse. I kept hearing Margaret's voice in my head. Financially free. Around 9 o'clock, I opened my laptop and searched Ryan's company online. The website looked polished and active. New client announcements. Recent awards. Photos from networking events. Nothing about layoffs. Nothing about bankruptcy. Then I noticed something else. 3 weeks before Ryan called me crying for help, his company had posted pictures from a corporate charity gala at the Hilton downtown. Ryan stood smiling in a tailored navy suit beside Vanessa, who wore a long silver dress and diamonds around her neck. He did not look like a man standing on the edge of ruin. He looked successful, comfortable, safe. I clicked through the company page slowly while the house stayed completely silent around me. There was a short business interview Ryan had done with a local Columbus magazine just days before the money transfer. "We are entering one of our strongest financial quarters yet," he told the reporter with a confident smile. I read that sentence 3 times because my mind refused to absorb it. One of our strongest financial quarters yet. My hands began trembling so badly, I had to place my coffee cup down before I spilled it. The phone call replayed in my memory again. Ryan's shaking voice. The desperation. The fear. For 69 years, I believed mothers could always recognize when their children were truly hurting. Suddenly, I was no longer sure of anything. Around noon, I walked upstairs and opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, where Harold kept important family papers before he passed. Insurance documents. Tax records. Old birthday cards from Ryan. I found a photograph from Ryan's college graduation where he wrapped one arm around me and said proudly to the camera, "Everything I am started with her." I pressed the photo gently against my chest and wondered when exactly my son learned how to lie to me so well. That evening my landline rang unexpectedly just after 6. My heart jumped so quickly I nearly dropped the dish towel in my hands. But it was not Ryan. It was my former neighbor Diane Whitmore calling from Arizona after seeing Vanessa's vacation photos online. "Elaine, I hope you do not mind me asking this," she said carefully. "Did Ryan and Vanessa buy a place in Naples?" I felt the room go still around me. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. Diane hesitated. "Vanessa posted a picture last month about closing on their dream retirement property. I assumed you already knew." My fingers tightened around the kitchen counter until my knuckles ached. Retirement property. Last month. Before Ryan ever called begging for help. After we hung up, I stood alone in the kitchen listening to the refrigerator hum in the darkness. Then slowly, very slowly, I began unfolding a truth I had spent my whole life refusing to imagine. My son had not called me because he was drowning. He called because he knew I would throw myself into the water to save him without ever asking whether he needed saving at all. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to explain my son's behavior away. Mothers become experts at that. We soften sharp truths until they barely resemble reality anymore. Saturday morning arrived clear and painfully bright after days of snow. I stood in my laundry room folding towels when I noticed Ryan's old high school sweatshirt still hanging beside Harold's winter coat. I pressed the faded fabric between my fingers and remembered the little boy who used to leave me handwritten notes before school. Love you, Mom. Good luck at work. Thanks for making pancakes. Back then, Ryan would wait by the front window every evening for Harold and me to come home. He wanted to tell us everything. Every test grade, every basketball practice, every small fear. Somewhere between those years and now, my son had become a man capable of looking directly into my eyes while inventing a financial disaster that never existed. The realization settled into me slowly like cold rain soaking through wool. Around noon, I drove downtown without fully deciding to do it. Ryan's office building stood near the riverfront inside one of those modern glass towers that always looked too expensive to touch. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes watching employees come and go carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Nobody looked panicked. Nobody looked like they were about to lose their jobs. Finally, I walked into the lobby and approached the reception desk. A young man wearing a company badge smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" For a moment, I almost turned around. But then I heard myself say quietly, "I am Ryan Parker's mother." His smile widened immediately. "Oh wow, your son is incredible. Everyone has been celebrating the Florida expansion deal all month." My chest tightened so sharply I had to grip the marble counter beside me. "Expansion deal?" I repeated. "Yes, ma'am," he said cheerfully. "The Naples Luxury Property Partnership. Huge opportunity for the company." Naples, the same city Diane mentioned. My heartbeat slowed into something heavy and numb. They had not been surviving. They had been expanding. I drove home before Ryan could see me. The late afternoon sun reflected harshly off the icy streets, while the radio murmured softly in the background. Once inside the house, I removed my gloves carefully and placed them beside the sink with trembling hands. Then I walked upstairs to the small office Harold once used for taxes and bills. Inside the bottom filing cabinet sat a thick blue folder labeled Family Trust. Harold created it years ago after selling part of his construction business. "This stays protected no matter what happens," he always told me. Ryan knew the trust existed, but never paid attention to the details because he assumed there would always be plenty waiting for him one day. I sat at Harold's old desk staring at the folder while evening shadows stretched across the room. Then slowly, for the first time since all of this began, I stopped feeling only hurt. Beneath the grief, something else was beginning to form. Something quieter, stronger. The kind of calm that comes after a person finally sees the truth clearly enough to stop looking away from it. Monday morning arrived with freezing rain tapping softly against my kitchen windows. I sat at Harold's old desk wearing my reading glasses and slowly opened the Blue Trust folder for the first time in nearly 3 years. The papers smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. Harold had organized everything carefully before he passed away. Property records, investment summaries, legal instructions written in his steady handwriting. I ran my fingers over his signature and suddenly remembered something he told me the winter before he died. "Elaine, love people with your whole heart if you want to, but never confuse love with blindness." At the time, I laughed and told him he worried too much about money. Harold only smiled sadly and said nothing else. Sitting there now with rain darkening the windows beside me, I finally understood what he had tried to protect me from. Not strangers, not business partners, family. Around noon, I called Harold's attorney Martin Green, whom I had not spoken to since the funeral. His voice softened immediately when he recognized mine. "Elaine, it has been too long." We agreed to meet later that afternoon at his office downtown. Martin still kept the same warm lamp glowing near the bookshelf and the same bowl of peppermints near the reception desk Harold always joked about stealing. After reviewing the trust documents, Martin leaned back quietly in his chair. "Your husband structured this very carefully," he explained. Ryan does not automatically inherit anything. All distributions remain fully under your control. I stared at him for several seconds. Even now? I asked softly. Martin nodded. Especially now. Something shifted inside me hearing those words. For weeks I had felt helpless watching my own son erase me from his life the moment my savings reached his account. But Harold had quietly left me something far more valuable than money. He left me protection, choice, time. That evening I stopped at a small diner on the drive home because suddenly I did not want to sit alone in the silent house just yet. I ordered coffee and turkey soup and watched families moving through the parking lot outside under umbrellas and winter coats. At the booth beside me, two teenage boys laughed while their mother reminded them to finish their dinner before basketball practice. Their ordinary conversation hurt more than I expected. I used to believe sacrifice guaranteed closeness. That if you gave enough love, enough patience, enough support, your children would naturally protect your heart in return. But somewhere along the way, Ryan had learned to treat my devotion like an unlimited resource instead of something sacred. Back home, I placed the trust folder carefully inside my bedroom safe and locked it for the first time in years. Then I opened my phone and stared quietly at the blocked messages beneath Vanessa's name. This time when I looked at them, I no longer felt desperate to be let back in. I felt something else entirely. Distance. And for the first time since Ryan made that late-night phone call, I realized distance could protect a person too. 3 days later, Ryan finally called me. His name appeared on my phone just after 7 in the evening while I was watering the little fern Harold bought me years ago from a roadside garden center. For one foolish second, my heart lifted. I imagined apology in his voice. Regret. Maybe even shame. I answered on the second ring, trying to steady my breathing. Mom. Ryan sounded calm. Too calm. Not guilty. Not emotional. Just careful. I have been meaning to call you. I waited quietly while water dripped from the plant leaves onto the kitchen counter. He cleared his throat before continuing. Vanessa and I are coming back from Colorado tomorrow, and we thought maybe we could all have dinner together. Dinner together. As if weeks of silence could be folded neatly away like old receipts. That sounds nice. I replied softly, even though something deep inside me had already gone cold. I drove to my bank before sunrise the next morning with trembling hands wrapped around the steering wheel. The streets were still wet from the storm, and the radio played softly while I rehearsed comforting things I wanted to say to Ryan after this nightmare passed. The young woman at the bank looked surprised when I asked to empty nearly all of my retirement account. $148,000. 40 years of savings. The money Harold and I had built one careful paycheck at a time. Are you sure, ma'am? She asked gently. I smiled the way older women do when we're trying not to let strangers see our fear. My son needs me, I said. By 9:17, that morning the transfer was complete. Ryan texted me immediately afterward. You saved us, Mom. I'll never forget this. I read that message 3 times before placing my phone carefully beside my purse like it suddenly contained something sacred. The restaurant Ryan chose overlooked the river downtown, with soft piano music drifting through the dining room and candles glowing inside little glass holders on each table. Vanessa arrived wearing a cream-colored coat and diamond earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. She hugged me politely without warmth. Ryan smiled often during dinner, but it felt rehearsed somehow, like a man trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy instead of actually living inside it. They talked about travel plans and business growth while I stirred my soup quietly and listened. Not once did either of them mention the money. Not once did Ryan acknowledge the sleepless nights or unanswered calls or blocked messages. Halfway through the meal, Vanessa excused herself to the restroom. The moment she walked away, Ryan reached into his leather briefcase and slid a folder carefully across the table toward me. There is actually something important we need your help with, he said. My stomach tightened immediately. Inside the folder sat property documents for my house. My house. The small brick home Harold and I spent 37 years paying off together. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his voice into that same gentle tone he used during the late-night phone call. Mom, maintaining this place alone is becoming unrealistic for you, he explained. Vanessa and I thought it would be smarter if the house transferred into our names now before anything happens later. I stared down at the papers while the candle flickered softly between us. There was at last the real reason for dinner. Not reconciliation, not remorse. Expansion. Again, Ryan kept talking about protecting assets and simplifying future estate issues, but his words faded into distant noise inside my head. I looked up slowly at my son sitting across from me in his expensive suit and polished watch, and suddenly I saw him clearly for the first time in my life. Not the little boy waiting by the front window for his parents to come home. Not the frightened voice trembling over the phone at midnight. Just a man calmly measuring what else his mother still had left to give. I did not argue with Ryan at the restaurant. That surprised him more than anger would have. I simply closed the folder carefully and slid it back across the table while the piano music drifted softly through the room. I will think about it, I said. Vanessa returned moments later carrying a glass of white wine and smiling politely as though nothing uncomfortable had happened. During dessert, Ryan talked about Naples again. Ocean views, private golf communities, investment opportunities. I noticed how naturally he included himself and Vanessa in every future plan while never once asking where I fit inside any of it. Not one question about whether I was lonely, whether I was afraid, whether giving away nearly all my retirement savings had changed anything for me at all. When dinner ended, Ryan kissed my cheek quickly in the parking lot before hurrying Vanessa toward their car. Snowflakes drifted beneath the streetlights while I stood there alone, holding my gloves in trembling hands. Then I watched my son drive away in silence from a mother he no longer truly saw as a person, only as a resource. The following morning, I returned to Martin Green's office, carrying the property folder Ryan handed me at dinner. Martin adjusted his glasses slowly while reading through the documents. These papers would transfer full ownership immediately, he explained carefully. You would still be allowed to live there under certain conditions, but legally the house would no longer belong to you. I stared at the window behind him, where freezing rain streaked across the glass in thin silver lines. He said it was for my protection. I whispered. Martin remained quiet for several seconds before answering softly. Elaine, I have practiced estate law for 32 years. Protection does not usually begin with pressure and secrecy. His words settled heavily inside the room. For the first time, someone else was saying aloud what I had already begun understanding myself. Ryan and Vanessa were not planning around my future. They were planning around my absence. Martin closed the folder gently and folded his hands together. Your husband trusted your judgment for a reason, he said. You do not owe anyone access to what you built together. That evening I sat alone in Harold's old armchair beside the living room window while the house creaked softly around me. The Christmas cactus near the fireplace had started blooming early, with deep red flowers opening quietly against the winter darkness outside. I thought about every sacrifice that shaped this home. Harold working double shifts during slow construction seasons. Me sewing Halloween costumes late at night because store-bought ones cost too much. Family dinners around the oak table Ryan now wanted me to sign away with the stroke of a pen. Suddenly the grief inside me changed shape. It was no longer only sadness. It became clarity, calm and sharp. I walked upstairs and opened the bedroom safe once more. This time I removed not only the trust folder, but also my will documents and several investment records Ryan knew nothing about. Then I made a list in neat, careful handwriting. New beneficiaries, new instructions, new boundaries. Outside snow covered the quiet Columbus streets, while somewhere far away my son dreamed about expansion and inheritance. But for the first time since that midnight phone call, the future no longer belonged entirely to him. 2 weeks passed quietly after my meeting with Martin Green. I stopped calling Ryan. I stopped checking Vanessa's Facebook page. Every morning, I made my coffee in the same chipped blue mug Harold bought me during a road trip through Tennessee 20 years ago, and slowly rebuilt the rhythm of my days around silence instead of waiting. The strange thing about heartbreak is how ordinary life continues around it. Snow melted along the sidewalks. Grocery stores stayed busy. The mail still arrived at exactly 11:15 every morning. One afternoon, I drove to the Botanical Gardens downtown and spent nearly an hour sitting beneath the glass conservatory watching elderly couples walk hand in hand through rows of orchids and winter roses. Nobody there knew my son had lied to me. Nobody knew I had emptied nearly all my savings because I believed his voice shaking over the phone at midnight. For the first time, I realized humiliation grows smaller when you stop carrying it like a secret wound. By the end of February, I had updated my will, finalized the trust amendments, and arranged for part of Harold's estate to fund trade school scholarships for local construction workers' children. Quiet, meaningful things. The kind of choices Harold would have respected. Then one Thursday evening, my phone rang again. Ryan. I stared at his name glowing across the screen while rain tapped softly against the living room windows. This time I let the phone ring 4 times before answering. Mom. His voice sounded different now. Tighter. Less polished. I have been trying to reach you all week. I glanced toward the blocked message thread still sitting untouched beneath Vanessa's name on my phone. That is interesting. I replied calmly. Silence stretched briefly between us. Then Ryan exhaled heavily. Things have gotten complicated down here. Of course they had. He explained that one of the Naples development investors had backed out unexpectedly. Financing delays. Legal problems. Cash flow issues. The same business language he once used to scare me into wiring my retirement savings now returned sounding strangely hollow and rehearsed. Vanessa and I just need a little breathing room until this settles. He continued carefully. I was hoping maybe you could help us one more time. One more time. As though my entire existence had become an emergency reserve account waiting patiently in Ohio for whenever their ambitions outgrew their resources. I walked slowly toward the kitchen window while Ryan continued talking in the background about temporary loans and bridge financing and protecting long-term investments. Outside, rainwater slid down the dark branches of the maple tree Harold planted the year Ryan turned 10. I remembered Ryan sitting beneath that tree with scraped knees and missing front teeth, proudly showing me a crooked handmade Mother's Day card. Back then his love came freely without strategy hidden beneath it. Mom, are you still there? He finally asked nervously. I closed my eyes for a moment before answering. Yes, Ryan. I am here. Another pause. Then softly, almost carefully, I asked the question I should have asked months earlier. Did you ever plan to pay me back? The silence on the other end lasted so long I could hear his breathing shift. Not offended. Not shocked. Cornered. Finally, he cleared his throat quietly. You know, I would have helped you if the situation were reversed. I looked around my kitchen at the old hardwood floors Harold refinished himself and the curtains I sewed 30 years ago, while Ryan played on the living room carpet beside me. Then I understood something painful but freeing at the same time. My son no longer spoke to me like family. He spoke to me like opportunity. I opened the silverware drawer slowly and placed my phone beside it on the counter. No, Ryan. I said gently. You would not have. Then before he could answer, I ended the call myself for the very first time. But by the following Monday, everything felt different. I called Ryan during breakfast, and the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again after lunch. Same thing. Around dinner time, I sent Vanessa a short message asking if Ryan was all right, because I was beginning to worry. The message never delivered. A small gray notification appeared on my screen. Blocked. I stared at that single word while the soup on my stove slowly boiled over behind me. At first, I thought it had to be some mistake. Vanessa was always busy. Maybe she changed numbers. Maybe Ryan lost his phone. but deep down something cold had already settled into my chest. That evening I sat alone at my kitchen table listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock. Then my phone lit up with a Facebook notification. Vanessa had posted new photos from a luxury ski resort in Colorado. Champagne glasses, designer shopping bags. Ryan smiling beside her in a brand new white jacket. The caption underneath read, "Fresh starts feel expensive for a reason." I looked at the screen for a very long time before whispering something I never imagined I would say about my own child. "What have you done, Ryan?" The silence hurt more than I expected it to. Not the loud kind of silence. The quiet domestic kind that settles into a house when nobody calls anymore. Tuesday morning arrived gray and bitterly cold. I stood at my kitchen window watching snow gather along the curb while my phone rested beside the toaster like something fragile and sick. Every few minutes I checked it again, even though I knew nothing would be there. No missed calls. No apology. No explanation. I told myself Ryan was embarrassed. Maybe Vanessa was angry that he involved me in their financial problems. Marriage can make people protective and proud. I tried very hard to believe that version of the story because the other possibility felt too cruel to touch. Around noon, I heated leftover soup and accidentally set out 2 bowls the way I used to when Harold was alive. I stared at the extra bowl for several seconds before quietly placing it back into the cabinet. That afternoon, I called Ryan from my landline instead of my cell phone. The phone rang once before someone answered. I heard music in the background and voices laughing somewhere nearby. Then Vanessa spoke. "Hello." Her tone changed the moment she realized it was me. Cold. Flat. Almost irritated. "Vanessa, sweetheart, I just wanted to make sure Ryan is all right." There was a long pause on the line. "We are busy right now, Elaine," she finally said. "Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Parker. Just Elaine. Can Ryan call me later?" I asked softly. Another pause. Then a sharp little sigh. "He has a lot going on. You should stop stressing him out." The line went dead before I could answer. I sat there holding the receiver against my ear long after the call ended while the dishwasher hummed quietly behind me. I kept replaying her words in my head. "You should stop stressing him out." As though a mother checking on her son had become some kind of burden. That night, I opened Facebook again, even though I knew I should not. Vanessa had uploaded more photos from Colorado. A private dinner beside a stone fireplace. Ryan holding a crystal wine glass. Shopping bags from stores I could never afford even before retirement. One picture stopped me cold. Vanessa wore a diamond bracelet with tiny emerald stones circling her wrist. I knew that bracelet. Ryan had shown it to me online 2 Christmases ago when Vanessa hinted she wanted one. It cost almost $11,000. I remember because Ryan laughed and said only rich celebrities bought jewelry like that. My chest tightened slowly as I stared at the screen glowing in the dark kitchen. 40 years of saving. 40 years of clipping coupons and skipping vacations and reusing wrapping paper after Christmas mornings. I thought about the transfer receipt folded neatly inside my purse upstairs. Then for the first time since sending the money, I allowed myself to ask the question I had been avoiding. What if my son never needed saving at all? I barely slept that week. Every time the furnace clicked on in the middle of the night, I opened my eyes thinking maybe my phone had buzzed beside the bed. But the screen always stayed dark. By Friday morning, the snow outside had turned gray along the sidewalks, and my little house felt smaller somehow. I wrapped myself in Harold's old wool cardigan and drove to the grocery store hoping normal routines would quiet the thoughts circling inside my head. I moved slowly through the aisles comparing prices the way I always had since retirement. Canned soup, store-brand cereal, frozen vegetables on sale. Halfway through the produce section, I heard someone call my name. Elaine Parker? I turned and saw Margaret Collins pushing a cart filled with paper towels and birdseed. Margaret had lived 3 houses down from us for nearly 20 years before moving into a condo last spring. She smiled warmly at first, but her expression shifted the moment she looked closely at my face. Honey, you look exhausted, she said softly. We sat together inside the little coffee area near the bakery while snow drifted against the windows outside. I tried to laugh things off at first. I told her Ryan and Vanessa had been busy traveling and dealing with work stress. Margaret stirred cream into her coffee slowly before looking up at me with careful eyes. Elaine, I almost did not say anything because it felt inappropriate. My stomach tightened immediately. Say what? I asked. She hesitated. About 2 weeks ago, I saw Ryan and Vanessa at the country club fundraiser downtown. I frowned slightly. Ryan hated those events. He used to joke that wealthy people paid $200 for dry chicken and tiny desserts. Margaret continued quietly. They looked happy, not stressed. Vanessa was talking about renovations on a property in Florida. My fingers tightened around the warm paper cup. Florida, I repeated. Margaret nodded. And Ryan mentioned finally feeling financially free. The words landed strangely in my chest. Financially free. Not desperate. Not drowning. Free. I drove home in complete silence after that. The grocery bags shifted softly in the back seat every time I stopped at a red light. Once inside the house, I placed everything on the kitchen counter without unpacking it. Then I walked upstairs and pulled the bank transfer receipt from my dresser drawer. $148,000. I stared at the number until it blurred slightly. Beside the receipt sat an old birthday card Ryan gave me years ago after his first real paycheck. One day I will take care of you the way you took care of me, he had written in crooked blue ink. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed, holding both papers in my lap. One filled with promises, the other filled with proof. Outside my bedroom window, the evening sky darkened over Columbus, while somewhere hundreds of miles away my son and his wife toasted to a fresh start I had unknowingly paid for.